Everybody good? I'm so happy to see you tonight. See what I was going to talk about. All right. All right. That's enough applause. That's enough kudos. That'll be fine. Oh, what's that? Oh, I wanted to mention to you all that I believe, and somebody might want to check Yahad Events to make sure, that the author of The Mystery is History, he just came out with a new book proving the resurrection of the dead. That is Adam Dressel. His book, The Mystery is History, came out a couple of years ago. And he has just about all the answers to the puzzle of the Olivet Discourse and Revelation. If you're interested in that book, yes, you can buy it at Amazon, or you can let me know and I'll send you a PDF of it if you don't tell anybody. Okay, I think he's allowed me to send some of these out. It's a very good book. I haven't got with him yet to correct a few of his errors, but he did a great job on his own. And he's coming on Shabbat for the next two Shabbatot, I believe it is. The book's pretty dense, but if you have questions, after he'll probably talk about the resurrection, but there's a discussion afterwards. I think this is a major doctrine. That is to say that Bible prophecy has been, to some extent, fulfilled. And it is so obvious if you know the history. And of course, the mystery is the history. Excuse me. I'm sure that he'll answer your questions. So these next two Shabbatot, 11 o'clock. Come and see us on the same channel. We'll be having a service. He'll speak. And then answer questions afterwards. Or you might buy his book. I know some of you are interested in Torah. I have his big Torah book, which is the Torah in Greek, in Latin, in Hebrew, and 2 English translations. It's also very good if you're wanting to look up comparative languages. I can't remember the exact name of it, but I have it out here. We'll find it. His second book was The Mystery is History. And then his third book, I have just bought that, and I'm about 2/3 of the way through, on Proving the Resurrection. I gotta say, he does insofar as anything can be proved. Not wine. I'm off the bottle for a while. This is cherry juicy juice. Back to the Revelation. Yeah, it is a determinate doctrine for our whole understanding of the salvation history of Israel, and now us too. It's like with people looking for these things to happen, remembering that the 7 years of the Revelation, what has to unfold in the future is everything in that book, exactly everything, just like it says, within 7 years. I don't think that could ever happen again. Anything we could interpret. No, you can't take Revelation 12 out of there and say, well, maybe this is it, unless you put it in the context of everything else. That's why he has that warning in chapter 22 about adding or subtracting from this book. And certainly you don't want those plagues that he speaks about there, especially lice. That might be the worst one, or having your firstborn killed. Well, that's in the Exodus plagues, but just as bad of things. So it's good that you're here and that you can at least hear a little bit of the interpretation. There's a lot more. That's why over the last 2 days, when we are, okay, well, if we continue on, we'll get to that and what will happen next. In the last 2 days, I made a little investment in some small books, 68 pages each. And in those books, which I'm going to read an extract from one of them, I want to give you one if you want it, but I'll need your, I guess I got some of your addresses. I'll need your address to send it to you. It's, let me see the exact name of the book if I can find it. I just got back from someplace, from choir practice. And I don't see that I've got it up here. But it's the, what happened in the 70s? What happened? Everything that's in there. The quotes from Josephus, the quotes from Tacitus, the scripture verses, everything is in there that you can check for yourself. And so if you want to put your name, if I have your address already, or if you want to put your address in, if I don't, trust me. Or on the other hand, if you put your email address in, I can have Lee come in, that is Commander Lee, scan this little book and I can send it to you that way if you'd rather. But I got a deal on 40 of them, I think. I'm happy. And I'm sorry, but I'm just not very organized tonight. But I guess I can tell you that scholars tell us that these prognostications of Yeshua, and especially Paul, regarding the day of the Lord, that is the day of the Master's coming and the time of the destruction of Israel, they said that those are failures. They didn't happen. And so Yeshua failed to tell, Paul failed to tell especially, and everything else we find in the New Testament prophecies, they all failed because Jesus didn't come in the way that they had decided he should come. It didn't happen, which has left the words of those prophecies and apocalypses in limbo now for thousands of years, still not completed. But for every word in those prophecies, there's someone out here who's trying to interpret this for the future. And in my pastoral ministry and experience, many people are scared because they've heard these things. They're very interested in such, but they only have a partial understanding of it. And they all understand, especially since Hal Lindsey, that this is for the future. Sometimes in the next few years, like if you remember Jack Van Impe, who passed away here lately, many, many more. For every word in these prophecies, we have latter-day prophet who will tell you what is going to happen, but they've all failed. They've all failed. The scholars have failed because they haven't taken into account that the mystery is in the history. After all, wasn't the Matthew 24 Olivet discourses, the prophecies, Mark 13, Luke 19, etc., weren't these promised within the generation that was alive today? Didn't Yeshua say this generation will live to see it all? Yeah. They lived to see it all. He even said that those that pierced him would see it and gnash their teeth. I think that's in Revelation 1. Everything has to happen in the 7 years, though, if it's going to happen in the future. For the initial 7-year period, 66 to 73 AD, as far as we can tell, everything did happen. And the Olivet Discourse is, of course, married to the Revelation, which is married to 1 Thessalonians 4:16. And there's an apocalyptic passage in 2 Thessalonians as well that talks about this very same thing. And Paul says, just don't bother to get married right now because something horrible is going to happen. And he's saying that in the 50s, probably 10 years or even less. Then it all started happening in 66. See what else I have in the notes. We see the path of these 144,000. So many think they're going to be in the 144,000, which are going to be raptured to heaven. Well, these were raptured to heaven. How else did they get from under the altar, killed and under the altar after being sealed, uniformed, told to wait there for a while? Then they're with the Lamb on Mount Zion. And according to the historians, were they not seen in the battles in the sky, and didn't many prodigies happen? How did these raptured saints in spiritual bodies get there? By the way, in a spiritual or fourth dimensional body, as I mentioned last time, NDE experiencers by the millions have experienced this out-of-body character, have experienced being able to assess in their debrained minds their spiritual limbs of their spiritual body. It's different. And as I quote often, even Carl Sagan, who was an atheist, you know who he was, astrophysicist. Carl Sagan said, if a fourth dimensional creature did exist, they could show themselves as though they were in the flesh anytime. They could put on the face of any person they wanted to. They could show their spiritual body as a physical body in any state that they wanted to be. They could walk through walls, or actually, as NDE experiencers do, float through walls, as Yeshua did in the Gospels. And he adds, and they can tear you inside out if they wanted to. And I'm kind of thinking that the only reason that the evil ones don't is because they're not permitted to. And with all today, all this hubbub about war with Russia, war with China, nuclear war, I'm thinking that the only reason there hasn't been this is because the greatest power will not allow it at this point. He will not allow it. What else could it be? What else could it be? The big fear when they blew up Japan with a nuclear bomb was they didn't know if the nuclear fission would stop. There was a high possibility that when it blew up over Nagasaki, it would never stop and it will consume the entire Earth. Once that fusion, once it got going, that it would keep on going through any atom and molecule that happened to be in its way and encase the entire Earth with fire. Of course, it's a good thing that that didn't happen. And as far as what prophecy Paul had that is significant for this study as well, in 1 Thessalonians 4:16, this, let me read it to you. You know it very well. For the master himself will descend from the sky with a cry of command. After all, he's taking the guise here of Yahweh Sabaoth, that is the commander of armies, descend from the sky with a cry of command, with the archangel's call, there's Michael, and with the sound of the trumpet of Elohim, and the dead in Messiah will rise first. Then we who are alive, who are left, shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the master in the air. And so we shall always be with the master. Therefore, comfort one another with these words. Of course, this is just a tiny little bit of an entire prophecy of the end times. And since I just mentioned end times, most people, I guess, maybe not, most people who are interested in these things understand that the end times had to do with the end of the temple, the end of the Judaism that they knew, the end of it, the end of Israel, the end of Jerusalem, the complete end of it. And the ending happened in 73 AD with the debacle on Masada. On Masada. So we've got a 66 to 73 war. The day of the Lord. The day of the blood moons. And throughout the rest of the New Testament, we find that, well, virtually all of the writers of the New Testament prophesy, or at least predict, that the second coming of Messiah with the day of the Lord was near. It was near. And I mentioned this many times, so you should know it. In somewhere around 30 AD, Yahshua came up with the prophecy called Olivet. And he said, both in Matthew and Luke, that the generation would live to see it all. Or this generation will not pass until all this has come to pass. And generation being 40 years in the desert, 40 years out of the tomb, etc., etc. 40 years it is. It takes us right straight to the middle of this 7-year war that ended everything that was prophesied that would be ended, 70 AD. Let me just read off some of the passages that talk about this in the New Testament. There are not 4 or 5. There's a whole string of them. Matthew 10:23. That things were not finished before he returned. Matthew 16:27, a parallel. Some living would see it. Matthew 24:33, and parallels. Before the generation ended. That's where the generation thing comes in. Matthew 26:64. The Jewish rulers would see it. Going to Paul, Romans 13:11 through 12. It's already the hour. The day is at hand. Romans 16:20. That he would soon crush Shaitan. 1 Corinthians 7:26 through 31. And the time was shortened. Think about when Paul is writing 1 Corinthians. In the middle 50s to the early 60s. There was hardly any time left before 68 began. As the world was passing away. When the New Testament speaks of world, it's usually not talking about the entire earth. What it's talking about is the world of the Roman Empire. That was the world at that time. Check me and see. 1 Corinthians 10:11. The ends of the ages had come. 2 Thessalonians 2:7. The mystery of lawlessness was already at work. Hebrews 1:2. It was already the last days. Hebrews 9:26. The consummation of the ages had arrived. And as I read through here, I think of so many topics that really should be explained to you if you're curious about this and want to teach others. This isn't just this little bit that I've given. This is just the tip of the iceberg, the tail of the elephant. Hebrews 10:25, that the day was drawing near. Hebrews 10:37, he was coming in a very little while, unquote. Even in James 5:7-9, that the coming of the master was at hand. Also Philippians 4:5 says the same thing. 1 Peter 1:20, it was already the last times. 1 Peter 4:7, the end of all things was at hand. 1 Peter 4:17, the time of judgment was to begin, with a parallel in Revelations 3:10. 1 John 2:8, 17 and 18, it was the last hour. Jude 18 and 19, the mockers of the last time. Revelation 1:1-3, and 22:6-10, this must shortly take place. The time was near. And as we mentioned before, Revelation 22:7, 12 and 20, Messiah is coming soon. Also, we see that in Revelation 2:16 and 3:11. Now, these are the passages that make direct coordination with the end times. But there's also a long string of parables. Just about all of them have something to do with the end of the age and the second coming. Now, my friends, my air conditioner is not working in here. As you know, I've just moved, and so I got a little fan. I want to turn it on. Got it? Plus, there are many other statements about the destruction and the coming of Messiah. And I won't bother to tell you these because some of these I got out of the little book I want to send you. Again, if you want one, put your address in the chat with your name, and I'll send it to you as soon as I get it. Now, let me read to you a short portion of that book. And you'll forgive me if I use the name Jesus. That's what he used. This is Ed Stevens, the head of the Preterist Society, who I made acquaintance with a couple of years ago. And anytime that I have a question that I can't figure out, I go to Ed. You can go to him too. He's completely open to questions. He's written about 12 books about this, which I haven't read. And Ed Stevens also wrote a book about the rapture. Why don't we know anything about it? Why isn't it written up in the so-called church fathers? Why isn't it written up in the histories? Half of this little book is questions as to why. The second half are answers. Jesus told his disciples, some of those who are standing here shall not taste death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. Son of Man really needs to have an explanation, but I'll say if you want to know what that means in the context of this passage, go out to youtube1.org and look it up. Look up every passage from Revelation or from the Olivet Discourse. That's our website. We've had several people do probably 25 or 30 audio videos on the subject. They shall not taste death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. Matthew 16, 27, 28. Paul told the Romans that it was already the hour for them to awaken because the night is almost gone and the day is at hand. Romans 13, 11. Paul also reminded these Corinthians that they were living at a time when the ends of the ages had come. That's 1 Corinthians 10, 11. Paul stated that Messiah's ministry on earth was during the time when the ages were being consummated. Hebrews 9:26. If that was Paul writing Hebrews, and we pretty much doubt that. James, who wrote in 62 AD, just before he was martyred, being thrown off the parapet of the temple, beaten with a club and buried to the head, 62 AD, 6 years before, when this was already coming to pass, whom Josephus said it was because of the martyrdom of James the just, brother of Jesus, that the war even came. It incensed the people, for he was loved so much. He writes, the coming of the master is at hand, and the judge is standing right at the door. That's in chapter 5, 8, and 9. Kepha, Peter, also writing shortly afterwards, says, the end of all things is at hand, and it's time for judgment to begin. I might add at this point, too, that if you understand the secular life of Paul as it is conveyed to us in Josephus again, in his Antiquities, yes, we believe Paul's in there, don't we, Sean? Paul's in there. And when the war begins, Paul is working for the king as a messenger to Emperor Nero. And we see Paul, who is called Saul in Josephus, going from famous personages to famous personages, doing what he can best to set up the war as he thought it should be. Now, that's a little bit after he was rumored to have died through the cutting off of his extremity. I don't think that happened to him, at least not before the war started, because he's got quite a history in Josephus' Antiquities. James again, the coming of the Lord is at hand. Peter writing, the end of all things is at hand. John, who wrote the book of Revelation, says in his first epistle, the world is passing away and it is the last hour. In fact, in that first epistle, there's some exegetes I know that you could talk to that have tried, perhaps successfully, to prove that the person whom John is calling the Antichrist is actually Paul. And he uses a very cool kind of secret code in 1 John to show us that. You might know him. Now, I better not release his name. In the book of Revelation, he says in 2 different places that all the things revealed in this book were to shortly take place, and that the time of its fulfillment was at hand. Now, we did that 3 weeks ago. Jesus affirmed repeatedly in the book of Revelation that his return was to be very soon, very quickly, very new, near, nigh. The New Testament writers taught that the return of Messiah would occur in their lifetime. There was not a shadow of a doubt in their minds. Are they all wrong? Was it put off thousands of years? I've been advised by some people that the reason those that wounded him would see him is because when he comes in the future, they would be resurrected to look at him. How ridiculous is that? They do not say maybe. The apostles do not say possibly. They affirm definitely that the coming and end were near, and that some of them would live to see it. As we've only touched on last time, there's fascinating background information regarding the New Testament and the destruction of Jerusalem in these historical records of Josephus. They're not hard to read. They are kind of like a telephone book in some ways. There are a lot of characters that need to be learned in there. Learn who they are, or breeze through and just find your favorite ones. You'll know them. Although he is not an inspired writer, according to this author, Josephus, of course, was a prophet. He was a priest. He was the son of the high priest. And he was a general, I think, definitely. When he guessed that Vespasian would become the emperor, that had to be a divine message from on high. He even said it was. So because of that, he was allowed to travel with the Romans and record the history of the war. He was there. Sometimes he was used as a mediator between those trapped in Jerusalem as though they were in the Roach Hotel. They could go in, but they couldn't get out afterwards. He was an eyewitness. He wrote for both Jewish and Roman readers. A cute thing is here that he wrote first for Jewish readers all over the world. And that text disappeared. It was in Aramaic. All right. And then he started writing it for Roman readers in Greek. And the copy that we have is the one that's in Greek. Of course, he's not going to write to Romans what he wrote to Jews. But in the 1930s, another document came out of the ground. I'm not quoting now, I'm just talking. And that was what is called Slavonic Josephus. What happened here is that somewhere in the past ages, probably around 1000 AD, when Rome sent translators into Slovenia to get the Catholics correctly indoctrinated there, about 1000, they sent St. Cyril in and his brother Methodius to translate properly the words of the scripture, because they really didn't have a language there. That's how Cyrillic came to be, Russian alphabet and so forth. Methodius and Kirill, they invented that by listening to the people and learning their language. They invented that. So Slavonic came to be, Cyrillic came to be. And on their spare time, Kirill and Methodius started going through archives that were there. Well, Slavonic is what they spoke, at least in the church in Czechoslovakia, or Czechia it's called now, and Slovakia and Slovenia. All right, so they found a load of documents there that were in Aramaic, and Kirill and Methodius translated those documents into their new languages there, Moravia, and those were found, excavated out in the 1930s. What it happened to be is exactly what I explained. The Aramaic Josephus, the book of the war, but written for Jews in Aramaic. And we read a lot about believers in that book. Now, the book is hard to read because of the archaic words. So I started 2 years ago working to translate this book into English that we could understand. It's a long book. It's like the Jewish War, chapter after chapter. And I'm about 3/4 of the way through now. I wanted to publish that because, hey, I need money just like anybody else to live. But in reading it and translating it, good golly, what information there is there. And why is it that American and European scholars don't want us to see this? Well, if you want to know what's in it about people of your faith in the first century, of course, when it was written, again, go out to youtube1.org and look up Slavonic Josephus. I have maybe 4 or 5 readings from that about people we know, like John the Baptist, a lot there with him. And a lot about, oh, they call him a wild man. Josephus does too. And about the wonder worker. Yeshua's name's never mentioned, but he's called the wonder worker throughout. And you can see the attitude of Josephus writing to the Jews in regards to Yeshua and the Jesus movement of his time. I believe that by the end of Josephus' life, that he became a believer, and I believe that his stepbrother, Emperor Domitian, had him killed for that. Okay, so as I mentioned last time, Josephus was captured early in the war. And because of his prediction that Vespasian would become the emperor, he was allowed to travel with the Romans and record that history. Yes, he was there. The reason his information is so valuable is because he was a Jewish eyewitness. He somehow survived. And to read how he survived of several escapes he made is just incredible. How did he do it? He was writing for both Jewish and Roman readers, and there were 2 different wars, and therefore forced to be accurate and objective as possible, because the ones that saved him out of the prison are the ones that kept him the rest of his life. Josephus says that just before the war, angelic armies, chariots and troops of soldiers running about among the clouds were seen, not only by him, but perhaps by as many as 2 million people there, surrounding not only Jerusalem, but here Stevens writes, Jewish cities. And in his book that I'm wanting to send you, there is a list of all the fulfillments mentioned in Josephus there, which you will be interested in. Oh, there was something else that I needed to add there. I do believe Josephus was a prophet. Too many escapes, too many times he wriggled out of being killed, too many times he was in Dutch with not only the Jews, but the Romans, too many times he got wounded. Just an incredible story. I believe he was a prophet, and I believe he was anointed to give those words to Vespasian and to write these words for us. Don't forget, try the Slavonic Josephus, which I call the Aramaic Josephus. If you want a copy of what I've got so far, and I've got just about all of it, let me know, and I'll send it over on one condition: if you'll read it, and if I can find it. It's been about a year since I worked on it, so I certainly hope so. Let me see what else I have here. Hold on. I'm going to another set of notes. So I wanted to go back a little bit and take up where we left off a couple weeks ago, and that is back to Revelation again, and to John chapter 1 and 4. Don't forget, just in the first 3 verses, we found the word of Elohim, the testimony of Yeshua, which is the 2 witnesses. We talked about the 2 assemblies. We got 2 witnesses, 2 assemblies, word and witness, and several other pairs of 2 that are significant, just like Matthew does. Sometime listen to Matthew in one of the versions that's in audio, and just note how many times he draws 2 things together. It's incredible. So in Revelation 1:4, John, unto the 7 assemblies, which are in Asia. In that day, Asia was in Europe. Or I should say, Asia was part of Eastern Europe and Turkey. That place was also called Anatolia, which also means in the east in Greek. And you might remember the map of the 7 assemblies. If you want to take that map out of your Bible and just take a pencil and go from the island of Patmos. I had these maps ready, but I know I can't find them in this short time. I just got that. And start at Patmos and go connect the dots up to Ephesus and then back down. It makes the form of an arrow, and you put a line inside the arrow to see where it's pointing. And you'll be amazed to see that it's pointing right to Rome, right to Rome. Try it. I'll find that picture that I drew and I'll show it to you in another episode. Favor to you and peace, he says, of these 7 assemblies. Patmos, of course, wasn't an assembly. It was a giant copper mine, 7 mile by 7 mile. This comes from him who is, who was, and who is coming. It is the Alpha Omega. He is, he was, and he was coming. And I'm seeing that as a description of the entire apocalypse. Past by chapter 3, he's in the present. By chapter 5, he's in the future. But not far in the future. These things come quickly. And who is coming, and from the 7 spirits, which are before his throne. And I believe that those 7 spirits are out from the righteous branch prophecy in Isaiah 11. You remember it surely. There shall come forth a shoot from the stump of Yeseh, and a branch from his roots shall bear fruit. And the Spirit of Yahweh shall rest upon him. And here we go. Spirit of wisdom, spirit of understanding, spirit of counsel and might, spirit of knowledge and of fear of Yahweh. Are those 7 spirits spoken of in Revelation? Or is he talking about the 7 angels, of which a few of them are mentioned? Maybe 2 are mentioned in Revelation, but funny thing, in the non-canonical books, all 7 are named. And in the book of Enoch, that might be the 7 there. Maybe you can remember some besides Michael and Gabriel. I think there's Raphael, the healing angel. Suriel. Name another one, somebody. I know him, Uriel. And Muriel? No. Betty? No, I don't think so. That's a New Age spirit. His delight shall be in the fear of Yahweh. He shall not judge by what his eyes see, or decide disputes by what his ears hear. But with righteousness he shall judge the poor and decide with equity for the meek of the earth. And he shall strike the earth with a rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall kill the wicked. He shall kill the wicked. That's not even in the Revelation. That is right there in a prophecy from the greatest prophet that ever lived. He shall kill the wicked. You think that's symbolic? Had the opportunity to listen to a sermon on YouTube. It's from back in the 50s. It's called God Kills People. Look it up sometime you think about it. Or look it up on my site. It's there too, our site. God kills people. Who is this God? Righteousness shall be the belt of his waist, and faithfulness the belt of his loins. And the wolf shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the young goat, and the calf, and the lion, and the fattened calf together, and a little child shall lead them. Bear and cow shall graze, their young shall lie down together, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox. The nursing child shall play over the hole of the cobra, and the weaned child shall put his hand on the adder's den. They shall not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain. For the earth shall be full of the knowledge of Yahweh as the waters cover the sea. And just a note here that these animals, and most of the time animals in the Tanakh prophecies, are concerning not people, but nations. It's like the sheep and the goats. We're not talking about nations here or the judgment of people. We're talking about nations. And look, especially at a time like this, or at a time like 66 to 73 AD, this is what was needed. And if it took Elohim through the saints, the vengeful saints, to kill them, that's what had to happen. They had had millennia of warnings. And as Ezekiel says, really, it's the fault of the shepherds, the fault of the shepherds. And I suspect when we have our judgment, these shepherds of today will be on the chopping block. Now, Revelation, this time it is, I'm about done, rarely quotes directly from the Old Testament. But almost every verse alludes to or echoes ideas of older scriptures. Over half the references stem from, what do you think? Daniel, Ezekiel, Psalms, Yeshayahu. Daniel provides the largest number in proportion to the length, and Ezekiel stands out as the most influential in Revelation, but one they missed here. If you want to know more about who the two witnesses are, look to Zechariah, chapters 2 through 6, and you'll find them right there. At least what you'll find are men of Elohim that have the traits that Yahweh needs to bring the lion and the lamb together. And from in 5, I'm going to quit this time on time. I'm really tired of week. Pray for me, please. And from Messiah Yeshua. In the text, of course, it has Jesus Christos, Messiah Yeshua. That's much better. The faithful witness, the firstborn of the dead, and the ruler of the kings of earth, unto him that loveth us and loosed us out of our sins with his blood. Did you ever consider Abel I loved, Jacob I loved, Esau I hated, or is that Cain I hated, Abel I loved, that he's capable of hate? It goes on to say in verse 6, and he hath made us a kingdom. I would like to talk about later what we have to look forward to. I haven't told about that for a long time, but I am at least partially convinced that I can tell you what we have to come. The few people I've shared it with are affirmative. He's made us a kingdom, priests under his Elohim and Father. Unto him be the doxa and the dominion unto the ages. Amen. Look, verse 7. He cometh with the clouds. And again, the word is Nephilim. Nephilim. There's got to be some connection here between the Greek and the Hebrew word Nephilim. And these clouds, are they not speaking of clouds of witnesses? And when is this? He later describes it. His clouds of witnesses following him wherever he goes in white robes, having been redeemed from the earth and set free from beneath the altar. And then every living eye shall see him. Such also as pierced him. Who pierced him? We have a testimony that a centurion did that, whose name was Longinus. Longinus, or Longinus. And all the tribes of the land shall smite themselves for him. Yea, amen. I wrote a history of Longinus, the centurion's name. And I guess I can finish with the story of this man. Oh, I can't, it's just too long. We'll do Longinus next time. It's important that we know, because it is said that Longinus, the man that pierced him among the Roman soldiers that day, lived. And he was found outside the gates of Jerusalem when it was finally destroyed. Not only outside the gates, but with the Nazarenes who came out. What a story. I am the Alpha and the Omega, saith Yahweh, the Elohim who is, who was, and who is coming, the Almighty. And I, Yochanan, your brother, and partaker with you in the tribulation and kingdom and endurance in Yeshua, came to be in the isle that is called Patmos, because of the word of Elohim and the witness of Yahweh. Let's take up there next time. Any questions?
Hey, Jackson, it's Julia.
Here you go.
Hey. You mentioned earlier something about a code that was written in First John that was referencing Paul, and then you seemed to not finish your thought. Vicki and I were curious about that.
I didn't finish my thought because I couldn't remember there are two names at the end of 1 John that hold on a minute.
It's okay.
I'm
That's
gonna
your
tell you
homework for
that.
next time then.
Let me tell you the guy's name. If I can get Facebook up here without it going crazy. Every time I'm on Facebook Live and I try to pull up Facebook, it just goes nuts. Oh yeah, I just remembered his name. Now I'm going to put his name in the chat. The man who wrote the book, I have his book, and it is a book trying to show that Paul is the Antichrist. His name is you know him? Are you friends with him?
No, I've never heard of him
Heard of him?
before. No.
I think I've heard of him.
You heard of him?
I believe so. Recently, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, let me show you him. There he is. Oh, I hope he doesn't get mad at me because when he gets mad, man, he gets mad. He answered something, Vicky, you put in on a
Well,
thread.
that's where I saw him at. Yeah. On the Yahad think tank. Yeah.
Guy,
Boy, he does get mad, doesn't he?
he gets mad. Woo. Sometimes he has campaigns against me. He does. He sees something he doesn't like, he just flips out. He said that he has reformed since then. He's gotten nicer. I hope so. So here's Thomas Cossette. If you want to, write to him, just ask him, where do we get your book about Paul? He'll be very much complimented by that. Seriously. Now I'm going to just take a look if I happen to have it somewhere where I can find it, or at least tell you the name of it. I don't know where it's sold or given away anymore. Which document?
So are you saying that this Mr. Cossette is saying that there is a code word
There's codes,
in
yes.
that really means Paul? Okay.
Yes, there's two names. I think they're at the end of 1 John. And those two names, when they're rightly parsed, they come out to be Paul of Tarsus or something like that. I can't quite remember. And I don't know the name of that book. I haven't looked at it for a long time. And on top of that, last year, I had a hard drive, external hard drive crash with all the stuff that I saved on it. So several terabytes gone. If you know somebody that can restore that data recovery and not charge $1,000 to do it, I'd love to get that restored. Let me see. I'm still looking here. I don't think I'm going to find it right now, but I ran across it not long ago. I'll ask you what the name of that book is so I can find it again.
Yeah, do that. I'm sort of afraid to ask him anything.
Well, yeah, really. Afraid to say this. Maybe I'll just
We'll just leave it at that.
take the recording off for a minute. Nah, we'll talk about it later. Okay. So, my friends, let me look at the chat and I'll let you go. Let's see where we are here. Whew.
Should I send you my address in the yahad.me?
Yeah.
Okay, because I put it in the chat, but
Wherever you can.
I can Well, I didn't know if you could see the chat afterwards, after you close down, or, I can send it in the yahad.me.
Okay. Yeah, let me thank you for your comments. And I didn't look into that yet. If Jewel, you're still there. Because I don't rightly know. I have to go look back at my book. All right, and if there's questions in here, I will answer them next time, or if those books that I ordered come in, I'll get those out sometime first of next week, okay? Somebody's in Canada. Julia? Thank you for coming tonight. I guess if we can, we'll do this again next week, as long as somebody's coming, okay? Oh. You're in Canada too. All right.
Thank you, Jackson.
Yahweh bless you all. Seriously.